Hello and what is up, YouTube? My name is G3 Iron, and today we have got some pretty awesome news. Those of you that have been around with the channel for a while, you know that we always wish a mirror of Kalandra upon you all at the end of our videos. And we're, what is this, 3 days into Legion League? And we have, as a collective guild, used our guild hedge fund money and deposits to gather enough funds, and we've done enough flips that we acquired enough cards to turn in a House of Mirrors set, which is a 9 stack of divination cards for a Mirror of Kalandra. So those of you that are wondering what it is, what it does, gotten some messages about that over our course in time as a lot of new players come into Path of Exile. It is the single rarest currency item in Path of Exile. What it does, scrolling over it here, it creates a mirrored copy of an item. So essentially, you can take this Mirror of Kalandra and go and create a copy of, let's say, the best item in slot for a particular build. You can create a copy of that. So the theory of a Mirror of Kalandra is that if you have an item that, let's say, another player has got the best weapon or the best chest piece or the best helm or the best boots, you get the idea, the best item for a particular build with all the best rolls, and they've spent tons and tons of currency crafting it, you go and you use a Mirror of Kalandra plus usually an additional fee on top of that called a mirror service fee. And you give them the Mirror of Kalandra plus whatever extra mirror service fee it is, and they give you an exact copy of their perfect item. Now, there's some stipulations on a mirrored copy. Mirrored items can't be changed in any way, shape, or form. So you can't change the colored sockets. You can't change the links. And there's a couple of other idiosyncrasies that you can't do. You can't necessarily change the quality of it. Those sorts of things. You obviously can't change the rolls on it. You can throw it in the grinder, as it were, and destroy it if you really wanted to through voling it, which would be silly. Anyway, so yeah, I just wanted to say shout out to everybody in the G3 guild that has participated in the guild hedge fund. Shout out to Ferrum and to Fat Rat, who have helped me do flips over the weekend. To 2 different guild officers who have helped do this. But big shout out to a bunch of different folks that have made bank deposits, as it were, to our hedge fund, so that way we could trade up and trade into this Mirror of Kalandra, which is really, really exciting. We've never been able to do this before as a guild. We've never really tried to go for this as a guild before either. So it's really cool to see what collaborative work can do as players play together towards a common goal. So the side effect of this, for those of you wondering, hey, Iron, how's your league start going? Other than, getting a Mirror of Kalandra, you can see over on the left-hand side of your screen, I'm level 68. I hit maps on Saturday at like level 66, and I think I did 2 maps on Sunday. I think that's legitimately what I did, was 2 maps on Sunday, and went from 67 to 68. So I played a little bit on Saturday in terms of actually playing Path of Exile, but mostly I've been playing Bank of Exile, pretty much all league start, just flipping and taking the deposits that folks have made in order to actually make currency. We've been doing a lot of currency flips, so you can see people messaging me for currency. We've done a bunch of divination card flips. For those of you that have specific questions, I already can hear you asking me this, and I don't say this mockingly. I just say this to remind you all of our kind of general principle about Bank of Exile. Those of you that want to know some of the general principles that we use, we've got a wonderful playlist that's set up. It's called Bank of Exile, where we go over a lot of the economic principles and economic theory. If you actually want to flip and make a lot of currency and identifying opportunities in a market space, you can apply real-world economics to Path of Exile economics and reap the rewards from those. But the general disclaimer on making currency and on trading up in Path of Exile is that if we, right here on the G3 Guild and Discord and channel, give you a specific recipe, generally speaking, and say, hey, follow this specific recipe, there are lots of other YouTubers and streamers out there that will tell you in an immediate moment, hey, go flip this, or hey, go do this, or hey, go purchase this. The problem with that, with giving an exact specification on how exactly you ought to go about generating currency, is that oftentimes an exact formula or an exact trade, as soon as it becomes public knowledge, the profit margin on it tanks. So let's say, for instance, you find a divination card recipe that, let's say it's a 10 stack divination card, and it'll cost you 5 chaos to purchase each of the cards. So it's essentially 50 chaos that you have to invest into this divination card. But let's say the item that the divination card gives you back is worth, let's say, 60 chaos. So if you're willing to put in the time and make those trades, you're making 10 chaos total off of the profit off of that when you sell the item, right? That's 10 chaos. That's great. But as soon as that exact recipe and that exact hole and opportunity in the market gets identified by multiple people, now there's lots of people competing for that same divination card. The amount of that item, the availability of that item then goes up because a bunch of people are farming that divination card, trading for that divination card. And so then the price, what happens is the price of the item goes down while the price of the divination card goes up. And then what you have is you essentially have a tipping point where it's no longer profitable at all to do that exact recipe. So then you have folks watching a YouTube video or watching a Twitch clip or reading a Reddit thread or reading a forum thread and going, hey, I did that exact thing you told me to do and it lost me currency. And that violates a lot of trust, right? That breaks a lot of trust between the community that the person was relying on to learn about how to flip and make currency and, well, just in general, the person that was trying to make the currency, right? There's a lot of trust that's broken there. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to break trust. If you trust us as a source of news on how to make currency in Path of Exile, that's great. We're honored by that. But we don't want to break that trust by telling you, hey, go do X, Y, and Z, and it will reap you A, B, and C in benefits, because it just won't. As soon as that information gets out, markets change, markets fluctuate. Sometimes it's about knowledge getting out. Sometimes it's simply about availability of a particular thing. So early on in a league, maybe people are farming a particular zone in which a particular card drops. Maybe somebody finds a new divination card from a new zone or a new layout and then simply corners the market on that. So maybe not a whole lot of other people realize that. Maybe it's something that's just incredibly scarce, or more than normally it's going to be scarce because maybe drop rates have been adjusted for the particular league. So depending on all of those different factors that play into making currency in Path of Exile. So those of you that are already asking, okay, great, you made a Mirror of Kalandra. How did you go about doing that? So some general principles. There are 3 general principles that I wanted to hit on. First off, the general principle is that we have a guild hedge fund, right? So we've got a bunch of different guild mates who are all playing and who are dumping currency together into a shared pool that they then can withdraw from at any point in time, and they'll get at least their deposit amount and then plus probably a little bit of profit back. So that's the first principle, right? The first principle is guild hedge funds. You can pool your currency together and make a lot more currency than you can individually if you pool it all together. 30, 40 people farming and dropping currency together is a lot more currency that's available for making trades than just one person solo farming at a particular point in time. So that's the first one, is guild hedge fund. The second principle is making sure that you've got dedicated bankers. So in order for it to be effective for, 5 people, 10 people, 30 people, 100 people, in order for it to be effective for that many people to be farming and throwing currency together, you've got to have somebody that's actually doing something with that currency. Otherwise, it's just sitting there. It's just money under the bed, as it were. You've got to have somebody that's acting as a bank, that's actually making proactive activity with that currency to then flip it and return dividends on the trades that are made, return on investment, ROI. So in order to do that, you've got to have people who are dedicated to playing Bank of Exile. Now, so the first principle was guild hedge fund. The second principle was you've got to have dedicated bankers. I just want to talk about this for just a moment. Those of you who like to kill monsters and who like to play your character in Path of Exile and really just slay stuff and butcher stuff up and experience all of the wonderful things that is Path of Exile, that's great. I like doing that stuff too. I also am really driven by the economics in Path of Exile. So for me, it's very, very fun to do all of this flipping stuff that results in the guild making a bunch of currency, and everybody gets more currency back that they then get to dump into their characters, and we all have a great time. I get a big kick out of that. Personally, me, G3 Iron. I'm not saying we. It's a rare time that I will say me. Me, I get a kick out of sitting and flipping and identifying holes in markets. Like, to me, this is one of the things that sets Path of Exile aside and apart from other action RPGs, right? I'm not going to name a whole bunch of names here, but there are other action RPGs that are great in terms of their gameplay experience, but are not necessarily great in terms of the actual economic experience of the game, right? Does that make sense? So when you're thinking about playing Path of Exile, I think Path of Exile is the best action RPG out there in terms of its gameplay, but then added on top of that, it's also the best economic trade simulator, essentially, for an action RPG that's out there on the market right now. So those two factors combine to really make Path of Exile a really awesome game that I really love and enjoy, and I love sinking time into. So we've had a bunch of people who are going out and playing Path of Exile and putting deposits into the bank. And then we've had me and, like I mentioned earlier, Fat Rat and Ferrum essentially flipping that currency. If you don't have somebody in your guild or in your friends group who gets a kick out of playing Bank of Exile, then you're not going to be able to accomplish things like this in the manner in which we're doing it, right? It doesn't mean that you can't go out and make a mirror. It doesn't mean that you can't go out and make a boatload of currency. It just means that this particular method wouldn't necessarily work. This is a method that we're using. So again, first tip, guild hedge fund. Everybody's depositing and pooling currency. 2, you've got to have dedicated bankers that are willing to just sit in their hideout and play hideout warrior and flip, trade, and who get a kick and who actually enjoy identifying holes in markets and then targeting those particular opportunities in the market space and taking advantage of them. It's a lot of trading, literally hundreds of trades that go down every single hour. So all that being said, that's the second principle. The third principle that is going to be at play here is simply going to be that you've got to have people together who trust each other. Okay, that's the third principle. If you've got folks who are willing to put into a hedge fund, but they're only dumping in 2 to 3 chaos at a time, that's great. That's fine. That's helpful. It's very helpful on the first day. But the more currency gets dumped into a hedge fund, the better it is for the bankers, the better it is for the hedge fund, and the better returns it is. So as you are identifying holes in the market, if you identify a hole in the market that maybe has like a 1x return for every trade you make, that's great. If you can make 9 trades, that's 9x that you just made. If you don't have the amount of currency that's needed in order to make those trades, you're missing out on a market that potentially can make you 9x. So maybe instead of making 9x, you're making 9 chaos per trade. Or it's in some total, right? So that's a big, big difference. So if people trust one another and are willing to dump their currency together and to pool their hedge funds, it's great. But those 3 elements are required to really use this method that we've used. You've got to stay on top of the markets. Like these are just like bonus tips that come to mind. You've got to stay on top of the markets. You've got to be able to identify whether or not things are really going to be profitable. You've got to make sure that you're not being sloppy in any of your trades. So being sloppy in your trades can mean leaving chaos as chaos overnight, or leaving items to depreciate in value overnight while you're not playing or while your banker is not playing. Sitting items overnight is a really, really risky thing to do. Yes, it's possible that the item skyrockets in value, but it's also very possible that the item tanks in value. If somebody that's a popular streamer goes off and plays a particular build that's using an item that you had sitting in your stash overnight, maybe it skyrockets. But if somebody doesn't show it off and make it really popular on a build, it's just going to sit there and probably depreciate in value. So maybe something that you thought had a decent margin to flip on earlier in the day, it's depreciated over into the next night, and now it's just awful. Now you actually lost money on it. So you can't take too many hits like that. You can survive that if you've got a couple of bankers that are flipping, because maybe 1 out of every 4 or 5 markets that you identify don't turn out. 75% of the markets that you're hitting at that point are producing you profit. So it's okay if you take some losses. You know, don't hear what I'm not saying. You will not hit every single trade, and you will not hit every single market making max value on. But oftentimes, if you are, in general, it's going to sound really cliche. If you're hitting more than you're missing, then you're making profit, and you're able to return that back to the folks who are actually making those deposits and putting that trust in you as a banker to actually make a profit for them and for the rest of the guild. So I'm really stoked that we have a Mirror of Kalandra. This is really awesome. For those of you that have already messaged me and said, hey, congrats, Iron, you said this was your league goal for the league was to get a Mirror of Kalandra. Well, this isn't my Mirror of Kalandra. This is our Mirror of Kalandra in guild. So I still don't have one. So I'm going to keep flipping. I'm going to keep trading, and I'm going to keep using the principles that we've learned from economics and applying them to Path of Exile. So that way we can continue to make currency. Everyone in the guild can continue to upgrade their items and continue to play Path of Exile in the way that they would like to play it with the items that they would like to play with. But for us, this is a really, really exciting achievement. I'm really glad that we hit this as a guild. And I hope that today is the day Mirror of Kalandra drops for you. And I hope that today is the day that this Mirror of Kalandra for our guild flips for us. And maybe we can get back to trading and identifying more holes in the market and making more Bank of Exile moves. I'm excited. Hopefully you are as well.
Nice patrons, yes, good patrons. They're so kind and supportive.
I can't believe you watched that thing. That was good job. You did it. You got through the whole video. Yay.